Stan is our guest here tonight, guest speaker tonight. Obviously well credentialed, AFL coach and premiership player, but more importantly he's one of a select group of people who are AFL coaching ambassadors. So focus tonight will be on developing leadership within teams and clubs, but from conversations beforehand, there are other things that people want to talk about. Stan's more than happy to open that up. So, welcome, Stan.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Roy. Thank you for coming out midweek on cold nights and that. There's a heap of other things you could have had to done. So, I hope that by the time I finish that I brought something of value that's made it worthwhile coming. Just to add to a little bit that to reinforce, yes, I've prepared a presentation which I'll talk to you about. But as I was just saying to the chaps up the front, critical component is that throughout the course of that night, I've got to make sure that I cover the areas that you want me to. So when we finish that, there's enough time, I'm sure there will be, it's up to you to take me where you want me to go by asking questions particular in relevance to you. I'll just add a little bit to that. I'm probably better known from the playing at the league level and coaching at that level, but what a lot of people may not have realised is that the side I coached before I coached St Kilda was Mordialloc Braeside under 14s. And I did that for it's probably never ever happened before. I did it purely and simply why? My son played, yeah, guess what? So that's how it came about, watching him and getting involved. And I'm going to tell you, so much of what I did, and it's an interesting situation, so much of what I did in terms of leadership and stuff I'm going to talk about, that I took to St Kilda was really only a sophistication of what we did in the under 14s. Because guess what, it's still about people. And it's about doing type of things in that situation and to get that. So I'm going to actually take you through, if I can, rather than just sit up here and talk theory. I'll do a little bit of theory, but I'll actually take you through and show you through an exercise of what I did at St Kilda. So I'll actually walk you through it in that way to give you an idea of the actual putting it into progress and how it came about from that point of view. I think the first thing to talk about in terms of this, and it's fantastic you're here tonight because I'm probably preaching to the converted, but one of the keys to doing anything, and especially in this area, is when I talk to successful organisations, and I might say also I have a business background, ran my own company and things like that, and I always looked at why are some companies more successful than others, why are some teams more successful than others, how come some stand the test of time and there's longevity and they go on. And so I started to research it and do that, and the thing that came back to me first and foremost, everybody kept telling me, is the most successful individuals, companies, teams, whatever it is, are proactive and not reactive. That was the first thing that came back. And so I said, well, tell me what you mean by that. And they said, proactive means that these people have actually taken the time to actually step back and think about it. Think about where they want to be. And as a matter of fact, if you talk to proactive people, they can actually tell you where they're going, they're going to tell you when they're going to get there, and exactly what they'll look like when they get there. So they've already done that and they've done their situation here. Now, that's different to reactive people who haven't done that, but then wait for events and circumstances to occur and then almost like do it on the run. The major difference, they tell me, is guess what? If you are proactive, what happens is you don't get sidetracked by events and circumstances. So that when you know where you're going, you have a focus in that way. Little things will come up, but you don't get sidetracked because you can put into perspective, and more importantly, you've thought about the what-ifs occur, and so you're ready to be able to do it. In that way, guess what? You're actually controlled by your head. Whereas if we're reactive, there's a tendency to go with the heart and emotion comes in, and those people spend all their time getting lost, going sideways, what they say, trying to put out bushfires. So the critical component is to actually take the time to sit back and really plan ahead of where we're going in that way. So that was the first and foremost thing. So therefore, if I expand on that, and people talk to me about building effective leadership in clubs, and I will talk to people, and I'm not asking anybody to give me answers here, but I'm just throwing it out here. I say people, okay, well, describe leadership to me. And guess what I get? A blank look. Or you know what? Guess what? I get a reactive comment. They try and think about what it is in that situation. So I'm saying, well, if you want to have effective leadership, you better know, you better be able to describe it for me. In your club, in your thing. It may not be in the same numbers because there can be a wide variety of them. But if you don't do that, how are you going to know how you're going? How are you going to be able to measure the leadership if you haven't done that in that way? And so from my point of view, I looked at, okay, what is leadership to me? If somebody asked me leadership, what am I going to say? And you know what? I was unsure. So I started to look around and other people's and I had my own thoughts, but different things, and I came back with this one for me. So it's just me, it doesn't have to be you. But leadership to me is the skill of influencing people to work enthusiastically towards and achieving aims for the common good of the team, the group, whatever it is. So first and foremost, it's a skill. It's a skill of influencing people. So how am I going to influence those people to work enthusiastically? It's got to be enthusiastically toward aims for the common good of the group in this team. So that's the situation. So every time I look back, guess what? Am I displaying that? Are the people I'm with displaying that in that situation? So that's for me. So therefore now I've got mine in that way. If I need to assess in any shape or form. Reinforce this again. I'm asking you to be students and not followers. In other words, I'm just going to throw it out there, but you will come up with yours in what you want to do. So the next thing is that if I'm going to do that and I want leadership, and I'm now going to come down to my team sport, and I'm going to talk about, obviously, in coaching in that situation, because from my program I'll talk about effective leadership is really about coaching, because leadership is going to be your ability to be able to coach firstly you as a leader, and then secondly the other people you want that way. What's my coaching philosophy is the next question. So in other words, if I want to evaluate how I'm going in terms of coaching, what's mine? And this can vary, obviously, depending on the group that you've got. I understand that. So I have to sit down and think about, if I want to be proactive, what's my coaching philosophy? In other words, at any stage, I want to say to myself, how am I going? I need to be able to come back and look at this and not just go all over the place in any shape or form, or even more so, not wait for somebody else to tell me how I'm going. In that way, I want to take control from that point of view. I'll share, this is mine. My coaching philosophy is to take a group of talented individuals, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, hopes and aspirations and dreams and desires, and develop them into better players both on and off the field, whilst at the same time mould them into a team with a common goal and help guide them to the attainment of that goal. Okay. So I can just rattle it off like that there. But if you want to break it down into each little section, you'll start to see some things stand out. Take a group of talented individuals in that way. Why? Because guess what? If I take a group of people, if I don't say to myself, everyone is talented, I'll start to look at them in a negative fashion. And it's easy to start to look what's wrong with people in that situation. But if I look at the leadership, now bring it back to that. So each with their own strengths, but also weaknesses. Each with their hopes, their aspirations and dreams and desires, and that's going to become critical that way. And develop them to be better players both on and off the field, from my point of view. So without going into too much detail, every time I can now look at my leadership situation and look at my philosophy. And I haven't even started in that way, but guess what? I'm starting to become, I guess what I'm saying is I've got proactive. So I can look back and now see if down the track, at this period of time, this is how I want to look, and more importantly, am I now throwing that through to my players at my disposal from that situation that way. So if I've now got that on my own mind, and just going in a sequence, and bear in mind we haven't run a training session, we haven't kicked the footy, we haven't done anything yet, because that's the cornerstone to it. What are going to be some of the key elements to this? What will be some of the key underlying things for me in that situation? First thing for me when I look at this is to understand that my philosophy is that people do not do their best by being told. Okay? And that was told to me when I was about 17 years of age, and I got this fantastic lesson. And this man said, Stan, people will do things when people in authority tell them. Could be mum and dad, could be the teacher, could be the coach, could be the boss, but it'll never be the best. The only time they'll do their best is when they want to and when it's going to get them what they want. So if you think you can go back to the time when you first started and the coach said you do this and you just automatically, you're kidding yourself. Because now it doesn't happen. So don't think you're just going to get success or you're going to get leadership by telling people in that way. We've got to find out those critical things. What do they want? What's in it for them? And as a result, lead them through. So that'd be that thing. What I also believe was this situation. Most of that success will come if I and my leadership am prepared to actually delegate and to empower. delegate and empower people to do things. If I put them in a situation where they are self-sufficient on me doing everything, waiting for me to tell them guidance and stuff like that, I'm not going to get anywhere. And the reason for that, from my point of view, is that there will come a time where they're out having to play in a game and they've got to make those decisions for themselves. If I put them in a situation where they're waiting for everything to come from me, they will never ever get to that point of view of being able to develop and become leaders in their own rights. And so therefore, my challenge for those people at my disposal is, how do I get them to buy in? How do I get them to take ownership in this situation? And we were talking earlier, because guess what? There will be some people who will jump at it, but there'll also be some people who will be reluctant. They might be shy, there might be a whole variety of reasons why in that thing. But guess what? What you can't do is say, I'm going to make these people leaders and leave these people out. Because guess what? You're doomed to failure. Because those people, everybody can become leader. Our challenge is, what's my skill of influencing them to be able to do that in that way, in that sense. So these are just really my elements that I'm now going to work with in that situation. So if I've now got that my basis, okay, how am I going to do it? What are the tools? How am I going to work? How am I going to effectively start to be able to do this? And to me, two areas I wanted to break down. First one was for the individual, and then second one was collectively within the whole team environment in that situation. So how were we going to do it in that way, become the critical thing? It didn't matter to me whether I was talking to under 14s, it didn't matter to me whether I was talking to senior players. The first thing was to be able to challenge every one of them to understand that they could get better. The rest aren't. Challenge their belief system. That was the thing that was level at St Kilda Footy Club in that situation. And I thought that was rubbish until I got there. And you know what I found? I found that the players believed it. The players believed it. The really good players believed it, and they believed unless they won the game, unless they did fantastic things, the rest wouldn't be able to do it. The rest were based on hearing it so often from so many people within the club, within the community, because it was always the same case. But what happened was that when somebody asked them, you know, how do you think you'll go? It was always, well, if our 4 or 5 do okay, we'll be right. Now the problem with that is, you play opposition. So when anybody played St Kilda, guess what? Not only the playing group knew that, but everybody else, the opposition knew it. So guess what? They targeted the good players. Because we can put them out, and so it was just reinforced time and time again in that situation. And so I then realised that I've got a problem here. Because unless I convince them to be able to do that, we're not going to go anywhere. You know, because this is not just about winning a group, it's not about talent ability. You can make them bigger, stronger, faster, etc. But if they don't believe, I'm going to tell you it will never happen. And I'm going to tell you right now, I see it watching AFL footy every weekend. I still watch games where the belief system is amazing. You'll see sides play well for 3 quarters and then something will go wrong and you'll see them drop their head. And it's, oh, we're gone. But with the really good sides, it just doesn't happen. And so therefore, I had to work on this individually. The first thing though, I asked myself is that at that point of time, 40 odd players, about 44, 45 players on the list. How, with all the things I've got, and it was a time where I only had myself and an assistant coach, so we didn't have a lot of other coaches. How in the heck am I going to fit in doing these one-on-one interviews with every person to do that? Now, I don't think I'm going to do it. But then guess what I'd just done? I'd made a limited decision. And so therefore my challenge was, now it has to be done. So I've got to develop some means and mechanism of being able to do this, to work with these people. That meant, guess what? I had to delegate. I had to get other people to do the jobs, because to me this was the most important in that way. And so I started a process of talking to every player and going through, and I'm going to go through here what I did. I'm going to use the whiteboard because I used the whiteboard in my office. I hope everybody can just see what I'm doing here. I got the first player in. This was a boy who had 3 years at the club. So it wouldn't matter how it is, but 3 years at the club. And he's a player who would get a semi-regular game. Okay, and he came in, we sat down, we had a chat, we were talking about a variety of things. And then I said, you know, I'm going to do something interesting with you. And I went to the whiteboard and I drew this configuration. So that's it. I said, what do you think of that? And of course, he's looked at me. See, already I'm thinking I'm not going to tell, I'm going to ask. He said, I've got no idea what you're doing. And I said, that's the plain list at St Kilda. He's going, what do you mean the plain list at St Kilda? I said, well, see that? That's the top and that's the bottom, that connecting line, best players up the top, worst players down the bottom. Oh. I said, now I'm going to ask you this question. Tell me, who's the best player in the club? And without hesitation, he said, Banger. Okay, nickname for Robert Harvey. You understand. And I said, what's so good about him? And he started to rattle off. Incredible endurance, great football brain, capacity to dodge and weave, beautiful hands and stuff that he went through. So I gave him the pen and I said, well, come and write where he sits. And with that, he came up and up the top he wrote Banger. Okay, fantastic. He's about to sit down. I said, well, hang on, before you sit down, write where you sit. And he started to think about it, and he came out and he wrote his name about there. You reckon he sees himself in the top 4 or 5? So right now he says, here's the best, and I sit here. So that's his belief systems in that way. So I've then said to him, okay, that's pretty brave of you. Tell me, I'm going to ask you this, why do you think I've got you in? And he started to think for a period of time, and he said, well, I think Robert's up there and he's really good, and I'm down here. I've got to try and get better. I said, fantastic. So guess what? Who's telling me? He is. I'm not telling him, he's telling me. I said, well, what would be the benefits if you got better? And he said, well, if I got better, hopefully I'd get a regular game, and I'd be able to push up and put pressure on everybody and make us a better club. And it was fantastic, that's terrific, it's just great. What are some of the things you think you could do? And so all of a sudden he said, well, perhaps I could get a bit stronger. I said, well, how would you get stronger? Well, I could go in the gym and perhaps my ball handling below my knees. So he starts to tell me. So all of a sudden I said, well, okay, so with that sort of stuff below your knees, who can help you get in that way? Oh, well, I could speak to the assistant coach and talk to somebody about that, or I could do... So guess what? He started to tell me. So he's just going in that situation. So I said to him, that's absolutely fantastic. Now, I didn't put this on the board, but I'm going to show you. At this point of time, we had some measurements, and those measurements were effective involvements in a game. At this point of time, this kid averaged 7 per game. Robert averaged 30. Now you can see the massive gap, understand that. And that wasn't on the board, that's just for us to know. So I then said, that's fantastic. So if you work on those things that you're doing, let's go jump 12 months. Do you think you could improve? My word, I can, he's saying. And I'm just saying, yeah, I agree with you. How much do you think you'll jump up the list? And he thought a bit and he came out. I said, here's the pen. And he crossed it out and he wrote his name about halfway up. So he's shown an improvement. Now, you as coach, would you be happy with that? I wanted more, to be honest. But guess what, if I say it's not good enough, what have I just done? Buggered him, haven't I? Just taken the wind out of his sails. But I said this to him, I said, wow, that's fantastic, because if you keep this up, I'm looking forward to the day when you become as good overhead mark as Banger. And he started to laugh at me. So what are you laughing for? He said, he can't mark over his head. I said, I'm looking forward to the day when you become as good a left foot kick as Robin. Started to laugh again. I said, what are you laughing at? He said, he can't get his left foot. That's why he always gets back on the thing and does it. I said, oh. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm looking forward to the day when you become as good a tackle as Robin. Well, then he got up, walked past me, took the pen out of my hand and said, he's never laid a bloody tackle in his life. And he crossed his name out and wrote it above Robin's. I said, what'd you do that for? He said, I just realised I am better than him in some ways. I said, exactly you are. You've been selling yourself short, son. See, I actually think you're better than what you think you are. And he started to go like that. So that situation occurred. So when we walked out, who was now going to drive it? So I'm now able to say to him, those things you told me, how you're going with them. Do you need any help on it? Anything we can do from that point of view? So guess what? That started to drive. I'm going to tell you what happened. It's a true story. Next year he went to 17 effective team involvements. Just saw himself in a different light. He was now driving it, but more importantly, not only he saw it, but guess what? he now believed that I believed in him. Because somewhere in the thing, with his perception, whether I'd done the wrong thing or not, he didn't think I saw him as being that way. He, as much as anybody, don't think he thought he was there, he thought I thought he was there. And so we started to do that situation. I did that with every player on the list bar one. And the only person I didn't do it was Robert Harvey. Because every time I asked every person who's the best player in the club, that's who they said. But an interesting thing happened. This is an interesting thing. All the people started to show a variety of improvements here. So we started to get, in that situation, just started to come up. We started to get on a catalyst in that way. But the interesting thing is, while this is going on, and Harvey hasn't had an interview with me, what do you think happened to his figures? Anybody want to hazard a guess?
They went up as a result.
Sure did, and it was pretty easy to remember because it went to his footy jumper number. And the question as leaders is why?
Everybody else was working.
Pardon?
Everybody else was.
Because he thought it was his role.
What did he think? If I asked Robert Harvey, where do you think you sit?
Top.
Exactly. He believed he's the best. So therefore, guess what? As everybody starts to push up underneath, what does that automatically mean going to happen to him? He's going to get better. And so therefore, just within that situation of dealing with those individuals and getting that thing, that what happened, but also for me, if I can say this, what I come to understand is, I had to be very careful, because one of the things of leadership is not to assume, and now I come to understand is, quite often, a lot of your improvement can come from your bottom third of your group. But what can be a tendency when you're in that situation to focus on your better players and perhaps not realise what we can get out of the ones down here. So all of a sudden now we start to set things. So now if we come back, leadership is the skill of influencing people to work enthusiastically towards goals. See what's starting to happen? When I'm looking at myself in that way. So I'm not saying that you've got to go out and do that, but I'm saying you must have as leadership is first of all to have a mechanism to sell the belief systems of each individual. That's got to happen. If we haven't got that, if we've got in our groups in that thing, we're never going to get it. So we're just holding back from that point of view. I'll just rub this off and we're going to do something else in a minute. Now, next thing is if I've got that, I want to talk about team. What about the collective and the collective situation? And the collective situation from our whole group, the first thing for me is to understand this, that one of the most critical things in any performance of any group is the culture of that organisation. The values possessed within the group and the people that buy into that situation. Again, I'm going to use St Kilda. When I said to the guys, if I asked you this word association, if I asked you at this point of time to go back in that era, and I said, if I said West Coast Eagles, what would you say to me? And they said professionalism, tough and aggressive. If I said Carlton, they said arrogant, and so they went through a series of things. And I said St Kilda. And blokes, you know what said to me? Party animals. And one bloke said, shoot yourself in the foot. And then one guy said, yeah, but everybody's second favourite team. And I said, well, why is that? And they said, well, it's because this is all part of leadership, make no bones about it. What do we want to be known for? What do we want the opposition to know us for? And that's why you'll hear so often, in so many sides now, doing these programs. Doing programs to get the players to work together and come up. Not telling them this is what we're going to be known for, it's what do you want to be known for. An interesting thing with St Kilda, again, just using that, when we went through a program, the players came up with this, they came up with what we want to be known for is honesty, trust, loyalty, discipline, persistence and commitment. And then we worked through, and we'll probably have time tonight, but we then worked through a situation and come out with, well, okay, how do we determine what is honesty? How do we determine what is commitment, etc.? And how do we measure it in that way? And so we talked about those things. You know why? Because we're giving people things by which we can judge ourselves. We're giving them the tools by which, when we start to talk about leadership, how we're going to assess it in that way. And when we've got everybody involved in it, the people who make the decisions, and not only the Robert Harveys, but everybody else down the bottom. And so therefore now we're starting to come up with those things. You know why? Because under my philosophy, to make them stronger on and off the field. And part of this is how we carry ourselves and what do we know, what do we bring to the club, etc. in those ways. Again, it's our belief systems within ourselves in that situation. So we're starting to create some things from that point of view in that way. Our culture and our way of going. As I said, there are ways of doing it, but it's essential. It is essential in that way that we come up with certain things. And each group will come up with their own. That's important from that point of view. If we've got those things, we're starting to get belief in ourselves. We're starting to see what we're judged for and what sort of people do we want in our. And we can see now, can't we? I mean, that's why, probably one of the most challenging things that's happened in AFL football in the last few years is that talent ability is a given, but it's do you embrace the values within the group? And we're finding that players with a lot of talent ability are now being let go because they don't meet that criteria. And so it becomes so important because that's what we've got to aspire to in that thing. So if we now do that and just going through my situation, is to talk about give people with common goals, strive towards the attainment of goals. Why? Because people don't do their best. They only do it when they want to. So what do you want? What do you want? Let me give you some case in points. First one. I'll use St Kilda. Now here's an interesting thing. At this point of time, these are all guys who've come through, have been recruited and got through being the best in their competition. So they're the best in Australia where they are. You can imagine how many hundreds of people they've now jumped ahead of in terms of talent ability. And I've asked them, do you think goals are important? And every one of them said yes. And I said, okay, fantastic, give me some examples and I'll do that. And then I said, okay, hands up those who've written goals for themselves relative to what they want out of St Kilda this year, and one hand went up. Only one, Robert Harvey. You know why? Because they'd spent all their time waiting to be told. Because they'd come through programs where they'd been told. You know what? Being told you cop out. Because you haven't bought in, you haven't taken ownership, and it's just waiting because it doesn't mean anything. But when it's yours, because goals we know are not only things we're going to go for, they become the reasons for doing things. The stronger our goals, the more our ability to continue in that way. And so we had to find those out. But it's interesting, because in the under-14s, when I coached, and I asked the kids there, tell me what's important to you in footy, they told me things like, can we get a fair go? And I said, why? And they said, because it's the same guys always playing the same positions, and the rest of us make up numbers. So I said, okay, I'll tell you what we do. You write down your 3 favourite positions, and what I'll do is that I will guarantee you'll get to play in those positions. So the kids wrote them down in that way. So this is what I want. That's all I'm asking, not getting too over the top. But it was interesting because one little kid of all of Ryan, I remember this, one kid wrote this, my first favourite position is the forward pocket. Fantastic. My second favourite thing is the other forward pocket. My third favourite thing is I don't have one. And when I sat there and said, why did you write that? He said, oh, Mr. Alves, you've been watching us for a couple of years, you know I'm no good. You know I'm hopeless, I'm last picked. And Mr. Alves, I will never ever get in the best players. But if you put me in the forward pocket, one week I might fluke it and kick a goal and get my name in the local paper. See, it's recognition. That was the important thing to this kid. You know why? Because guess what? And it's the same, have you ever looked up sport for junior sport? It's that tiny, isn't it? But guess what? That kid's name to him and his mum and dad and his extended family, how big is it? So therefore, just see, that's what he wanted. Now I got that kid to play better than he's ever played before because I gave him a chance to play in the forward pocket. And now what? The trade-off was, guess what? He'd start to do things that I wanted him to do. And so therefore, at St Kilda, we had to tell the senior players, this is how you set goals. Short-term, long-term, medium. We had people come in and do it. Now again, I'm just saying, you don't have to get as sophisticated. But taking the time to find out, because guess what? Blokes run different things. But when one bloke wrote this, he said, my goal this year of playing for St Kilda is to make big bucks. That's what he wrote. You imagine my first reaction. Under my breath, I remember what I said to myself, you mercenary bastard. And then I had to check myself, how dare I? Because under our value systems, one of them was honesty. And what was he doing? He was being honest. You know what? One of the greatest things is develop relationships between people. Relationships boil down to trust and respect. If you don't get the trust and respect, I don't care, you'll never be a leader. And now my challenge is develop a communication where I don't break that down, but this bloke is now being honest with me. But you know what? There's more ways to skin a cat. And I remember saying when I thought about it, I started thinking, I thought, wow, I said, mate, how good is this? He said, what do you mean? I said, how good is this come the end of the year? He said, what are you talking about? I said, come the end of the year, we've played finals footy. Mate, how good's that for you? He said, what's that got to do with me? I said, mate, you've got to understand, two types of people play footy, successful and unsuccessful. And the successful people are the ones who play finals football, and you know what happens to them? He said, well, I said, they make big bucks. He leant forward, you know what he said to me? Geez, I like those finals. So if I said finals, what did he hear? He heard money, but does it matter? See, that was his goal. That was his switch. That was his turn on. The other, give people a chance to work towards, to understand your people within the group. And now we're starting to develop, you know, people say, well, aren't we going to talk about leadership? Let me tell you, we're talking about leadership. We're creating an environment that's going to give us an opportunity to be able to come down to become leaders. Because you say to people, go out there now and be a leader. Huh? See, we've got to give them tools. We've got to give them ways and give them means to actually set up and think situations. Just think this now. All of a sudden, here's a club where the players are now telling me what they want. They're now telling me in situations that what they want, you know, in terms of getting better, but also what their goals are. But guess what I now start to say to them in terms of if we can start to work through, what do we want as a team? And it was the first time now, guess what? They started to talk about playing finals. Well, tell me, fellas, what are we coming here for? What do we want out of it? Because if we can play finals, we're going to get some of these other different things. So all of a sudden now we start to lift. This is where we're going. Guess what? How can we know where we go if we haven't got somewhere to go? Now, I don't care what it is, but you've got to give somebody something to see, some vision, that proactive situation of seeing something, because if we do that, the next question that comes from this, but it can't be answered without that, is what do we need to do to get what we want? What's our plan? What is our plan of what we're going to go for in that situation? And we start to work on it. And that's where you as coaches come in, and you know your game, and you know the length and breadth of the group that you've got, and the sophistication. But I'll just use St Kilda if I may. This is what we come up with. And we actually wrote it everywhere. And the great thing is that we actually wrote it and plastered it all through the rooms because we wanted everybody outside to come and actually go crazy trying to work out what it was. What do you think GB was? Game plan. What's our game plan? And so our game plan came down to individual things we need to do. It came down to team situations we want to do. And whole of throw. And it came down, it could be the positions you play, forward, backs and on-ballers, and a whole range of different things that we started to talk about what we needed to do. So that started to expand out. Now that can be, again, the sophistication of your group. You can imagine that when you get to an AFL side, and I've just got the thing here, that with the AFL side, what we had in that situation, we had performance components under our game plan, where our fitness level and our skills, basic positional, team forward, backs and on-ballers, our style of play, our game plan, the 3 phases of the game, when they've got the ball, we've got the ball, it's in dispute, etc., and so on, and tactics such as kick-ins and rotation. So we started to come up with different things that we started to put little things into that situation that way. Okay, so that's just the first bit. Now you can imagine with under 14s, you reckon I'm going to have that much stuff? Of course not. But we're going to give something that we're working towards in that situation. TR, anybody know what TR was?
Training?
No.
Team rule.
Team rules. Our team rules on field and off field. Oops. On field, off field. So our off field basically can almost be our values. Honesty, trust, loyalty and the things that we're going to do. And on field, our team rules could be, just go back in those days, no U-turns or whatever what you're going to put in. So there can be different things and stuff in that situation we know from that point of view. CRP, anybody want to know what CRP is?
Collective responsible people.
Very good, but not it. Constant relentless pressure. A lot of people might call it one percenters or sacrificial acts and stuff like that. But what are the things by which we're going to measure the things that we do? Now what's that? Guess what it is in simple terms. What do we do when we haven't got the ball? For us it was run past, tackles, chases, smothers, borings, knock-ons, punch with purpose, protect the ball carrier. We did this in 4 years at St Kilda. Whenever we had more than 234 of those things and a team involvement, everybody, we never lost a game. If we ever had less than that, we never won a game. And the reason is because all those things, run past, chase, tackle, smothers, borings, knock-ons, you know what they do? They take you to the contest and you start to outnumber. So when people think it's fantastic, all those different things, but the reality is it brings you, and you actually got more chance of getting the footy. And guess what? By doing that, you know how many it worked out to? It worked out to every person around 4 a quarter. So if you said to somebody, can you give me 4 of a run past, chase, tackle, smother, boring, knock on, punch with purpose, guess what they say? Yeah! But you know what, when the side's been beaten or have a bad day, you know what the first thing to go is? Those things. It's okay, so I'm in. It doesn't matter if you do it, and you can have your own stuff and things like that, but you know what they are? They're just now measurements which will enable us to say how we're going. They became the critical things from that point of view. And then what we did is in talking amongst the group, what we did is we come up with what we called our key performance indicators. So if you're playing in a certain position, what are the things we want you to do? Now again, it's sophisticated. Guess what? I'll just give you on ball and midfield. If you're playing the on ball and midfield, what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate this. The things you're going to be doing. Did you set the scene? In other words, hard at the contest. Were you hard at the ball? If you didn't get the ball, were you hard at the man? Did you get the setups right? Did you take them on? Quick hands? Did you change before you get tired, etc., etc.? Backs, set, position them where you want them to be, get the matchups right, punch with purpose, give no chances, settle slow, don't panic, control the game, so on others. So they're just the things that we started to develop. Now, guess what? Not just me, but talking to my guys who were playing at that sophisticated level, we started off with a few and then they start to add them because they're important in that way. So we've got our indicators and we've got those things that we've now set for us in that situation. We've got our goals and stuff and things like that. All right? Now we're in a position to develop leadership. Now we're in a position to develop leadership. I know it's sophisticated from that point of view, but how's leadership is? We're going to develop leadership by giving ownership. And that ownership is going to come through this. I'll write it on the board. Review. Our leadership, we've got our values, it doesn't matter what it is, we've got the way we want the game to be played, we've got the things that you've set yourself to do. When we play in a game, we've got these different things and stuff like that. Review. How are we going to review? We're going to review as often as we need to. The more we review, the better. We don't want to wait for a long period of time because we miss the opportunity. But review will always be done in this fashion. It will be 3 questions. And the first question is, what are we doing well? The second question will be, what could we have done better? And the third question will be, what do we now need to do? They are the 3 things upon which we're now going to develop leadership in that situation. So how are we going to go about doing it? We're going to do it every time we have a team meeting. We're going to do it every time we have a training drill. We're going to do it every time we play in a game. We're going to do it every time at quarter time, half time. We're going to do it every time we get involved in any way. It's going to be the cornerstone for that in that situation. Okay? So how do we go about that? Well, let me just say, for example, we can start at training. And at training, so therefore, we're going to do a training drill. And at training, we know in this situation, so it's just a training drill, we don't have to worry about all the other stuff. But at training, we're now going to go through an exercise, and everybody knows after a period of time that what we're going to do is that we know the exercise we're going to do. So in other words, I'll just make it up. Okay, fellas, what we're going to do is we're going to do off the fence drill. Okay, fantastic. Ready to go? Does everybody understand the drill? Now I'm going to come to you, but you don't have to answer. So you're my team in that situation. And the first and foremost is to understand this. We will never ever stand in front of the group, no matter what numbers, and ask the group on whole, tell me what do you think we need to do. And the reason for that is because you will find it will always be the same outgoing people who answer. And the ones who are shy will never answer. So therefore, that will not achieve leadership, it will not achieve what we want. So therefore, in that situation, we're about to do this training exercise, everybody knows. This is what we do as a coach. I come to the player. I come to the player and say, we're now going to do this drill. Give me something you know that we need to do to make this drill work. And I wait for the answer. He gives me the answer. I say, fantastic, do you agree? Yes, so do I. Terrific. You give me something we need to do to make this drill work. Wait for the answer. Fantastic, terrific. I'll come to you. Give me something that you believe we need to do to make this drill. He's a shy person. He sits there, he's sweating. There's no way known he wants to answer. And while he's sweating and everything like that, what does happen? Does anybody know what normally happens in the group? Somebody else will answer for him. And I say, hang on, I didn't ask you. And I'll come back and say, you give me something, and I'll wait. I don't care what it is. And as soon as he gives me something, I then go to the person who answered for him and say, do you agree? Yes, so do I. Terrific. So we've already done it. I want them to tell me what needs to be done, because who's going to have to deliver it? Who's taking ownership? Who's getting buy-in? So we go out now to do the training drill. So the training drill's been going for X period of time, doesn't matter. I sit and watch and stuff like that. I've got to bite my lip, because there's a tendency for me to want to jump in and say, no, you don't do it that way. Stop that bloody drill. I want you to do this. Guess what I've just done? I've just destroyed the concept of what I want to do, haven't I? Because I'm now saying, no, I'm going to tell you what to do. Wait for it. So then, guess what? Okay, come in. We've been doing it for 5 minutes. Come in. Now we start what I talked about. Give me something you think we're doing well in the drill. See, I've picked out, we're buggering it up, but what have I said first off? What are we doing well? I'm reinforcing it. Why is review important? Guess what we tend to do every time we stop and review? We tell people what's wrong. But now, you know what's just really difficult for many people? To tell you what we're doing well. We're worried about that there's people that we're a big head. But all I want that person to do something and I go, fantastic, I agree. You give me something we're doing well. And so I'll go through and ask 3 or 4, then I'll say, okay, give me something you think we can do better. So now I'm asking that. So now I do better, okay? Something we're doing well, something we could do better. Now, during the course of that, I'll come to me, during the course of that situation, guess what? They may not have said the thing that I wanted. But I then will say, fantastic, but what about if we did this? I noticed this. What do you think about that? See, it's a difference in the way he's presented it. And then I say, okay, we're now going to go out and do it again. Can I just reinforce the things that we talked about? We're going to do this, and I just go to one again. So now as we go out and we're doing it, we go out and do it, I can get that to come back 3 or 4 times. Now, here's the critical component. If I now do that, not necessarily all the time, but on a semi-regular basis, once we've set the scene, people will understand this. When we're going to now do the drill, during the course of the drill, what do you think's going on? Anybody done this, or hazard a guess of what's happened?
Starting to become self-directed.
Self-directive, yes, exactly.
Standards come up.
Standards come up, yes. Yeah,